So everyone, thanks a lot for coming tonight. We've got Liesbeth Geerligs doing a presentation today on habits, changing habits, and actually once we decide we're going to change a habit, how to make that happen so that we actually get a change in our life and lifestyle. So Liesbeth Geerligs, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for coming tonight, everyone. And I'm hoping that tonight's going to give you some really practical tools that you can take home and get started. It's going to be a contribution of kind of what I've learned from the research, because my background is not just clinical psychology but actually mental health research and health psychology research. So a lot of the up-to-date information is what I'm going to give you, and also the kinds of practical tools that I use with my clients here every day. So the main thing that I hope for tonight is that it's really useful. Please feel free to ask questions throughout. There's no need to wait till the end. You can be as interactive as you want. Front row participation highly encouraged. And also what I'm going to do is give you the handout that you've got and talk you through that at the end so that you can go home and start using it as soon as possible, because the thing that is most fundamental in all the habits research that we know is that starting is actually the hardest part. I think most of us can relate to that, right? Actually getting yourself into that new rhythm is often, you know, there are a lot of simple obstacles, there are thoughts you have about why you don't want to do something, but once you get going, you can get into a routine. So tonight we're going to talk about kind of 4 main ways to do that. So how to set yourself up kind of for success. We're going to look at, I might just rub this off actually, so I've got the whole space. Just to give you an outline. We're going to talk first about values and motivation. And then we're going to look at awareness, which is about really paying attention to where your habits come from, the good ones and the bad ones, so the ones that you want to keep going and the ones that you want to give up. And that's where we'll be talking about triggers. And then we're going to talk about the importance of persistence, or what I'm going to call never give up, because this is where a lot of habits go wrong, when we have trouble kind of maintaining that process. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about identity and how the person that you think you are can actually shape the habits that you choose, or how hard they are to maintain. So that's going to be the basic outline of where we're going. And I'm going to put some other tips and stuff up on the board as well. But as I say, you're welcome to take notes. You know it's being taped. You can watch it whenever you need to. So no pressure on the spot, right? There's a lot of information. I've tried to keep it, you know, pretty user-friendly for the hour that we have. But you're also welcome to ask me questions afterwards. So before we start, a little bit of a personal introduction about me and why I'm so interested in habits, both personally and professionally. So as I've said, my background is in mental health research as well as clinical psychology. I used to work at the Black Dog Institute, if anyone's heard of that. Yeah, so they look at depression and well-being and kind of a range of mood disorders. And then I went to work at St. Vincent's Hospital, and I worked with people with a lot of kind of chronic illnesses, chronic health conditions. Obviously they have a lot of needs to kind of change different habits to look after their health. So taking the research side of things has kind of given me that background. And then personally, when I was 22 is probably when my habits journey started. I was diagnosed with this condition called insulin resistance. Don't know if anyone's heard of that. Yeah. So basically all you need to know about that is it's a condition where the insulin in your body is not very effective, puts you at a higher risk of getting things like diabetes. And I went to see this specialist, and he said to me, okay, you're going to have to be on medication for the rest of your life because it's that serious. It could affect your pancreas. And I was like, wow, okay, this is really shocking. Is there another alternative? And he said no. And I took the medication and it didn't agree with me. It made me quite sick. In the end, they said, look, okay, this is your other option. You have to change your lifestyle now, quite drastically. You have to change your diet. You have to form a regular exercise habit. You're going to have to not eat sweets. You're going to have to monitor what you're eating. You know, you're going to have to form some new habits. And I thought, well, how hard can this be? I'm young, I'm healthy, this is going to be fine. This is going to be easy. I don't know if anyone can imagine how well that went for me at 22. Yes, some laughter. So you understand, you know, it was not as easy as I thought. There were a lot of social situations I faced where there were a lot of triggers to eat the wrong thing. There were a lot of thoughts I had, a lot of obstacles I encountered. And I guess along the way, I've learned a lot of skills, because now it's 8 years later and I don't take any medication. All my blood sugar results are acceptable. My endocrinologist said to me, I discharge you just keep doing what you're doing. So this is not to say that I consider myself an expert, but definitely that I feel I've pulled some information from my own experience. And now that's the kind of thing that I use with my clients all the time as well. And the kind of things that they look at are really varied. So I do work with people with drug and alcohol addictions, with eating disorders. Their habit situations are more extreme. But I also work with people who are just wanting to change their habits at work, or they want to develop a mindfulness practice. They'd like to exercise more. They'd like to have less arguments in their relationship. So lots of really relatable problems, and I think, things that we can all understand. The types of obstacles we face, they might be different, but we can all benefit from some simple strategies. So that's really the main strategies that I'm going to cover. Since we're such a small group, and if it feels okay to you guys, I'd love for you to just introduce yourselves. If you do have any burning questions about habits, let me know. I'll make sure we cover them. Or if there's a habit that you've tried to work on and struggled with, do let me know. No pressure to speak. I personally don't like being put on the spot, so you're welcome to pass. But if I could just get a sense of you guys, since we're a small group, I want this to be as interactive and useful as possible. So I'll put you on the spot first, Stu.
Okay, my name's Stuart. I'm a massage therapist here at PwC, and I suppose I really like routine, and when you have to change, that I do find it difficult at first, but then once I get into the routine of a new routine of it, then I'm fine.
Yeah.
So just change is a bit difficult for me, and but once I get going...
Once you're going, you're fine. Exactly right. Yeah, it's that change point, and we're definitely going to talk about that a bit tonight, so I hope that'll be helpful.
Yeah, so Nick's my name. I'm actually the security guard just up the road at King's Warehouse. Yes. The hardest thing for me that stands out is motivation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I struggle a lot with that, and it's just frustrating.
Yeah, so how do you get that motivation? How do you sustain it? Yeah, so good. We're definitely going to cover that a bit. I'll make sure of it. So.
My name is Leslie. I work in the city and I'm a client here at Petrozzi. And I think my biggest struggle is, why are bad habits so easy to keep and the good habits are the hard ones to get to? It's so easy to fall into bad habits and can't ever break them.
Exactly, and I think actually I was going to use cartoons, but they're not going to work. But I think, Leslie, you'll appreciate this one. And he says, I'm giving up all of my good habits. They're easier to stop doing than my bad habits. I think we can all relate to that, right? I find human behaviour quite fascinating. Why is it that, you should not like the taste of chocolate and you should like the taste of Brussels sprouts? Because why don't we want to do the things that are good for us? So we are contrary beings. So we will talk a little bit about that too. Obviously.
I'm Janet, and I'm actually Liesbeth's mother.
Yeah.
I think she's brought me along here because she would like me to change some of my habits, probably.
Not at all.
But I have been struggling with meditation. I know meditation is very good, and I find it just difficult to keep it going. So.
Yeah, and that sustaining habits is definitely part of the talk, so I think it will be useful. And back row.
I'm Ross. There's a couple of things I really relate to what you say about the sugar. I was diagnosed with diabetes a couple of years ago. And it was really easy for me to change my eating habits. And they were habitual. I just changed overnight.
That's awesome.
So, but the motivation was there for me to do so. Other things in my life, I find it very difficult to break a bad habit. And there's habits that I've tried to develop that I have a great deal of trouble
Keeping on with.
making them a habit.
Yeah.
Once they are habitual, like my dietary things, that's easy. I don't put any effort into it, but others, doesn't matter how much effort, I can't do it.
Yeah, just can't keep it going. Absolutely. Yeah, so we will be talking about that, so I think that'll be good because it's a very, very common thing. How do we become aware of where it's going wrong when you can't sustain a good habit? Like, how do you change that pattern? Okay, cool.
Yeah. Oh, I'm Hillary, sorry. I can't think of anything, of any habits that I want to change to. I know that I am very bad at change. Fearful would be a good word.
Me too. Absolutely. I find change I think my mum will vouch for the fact that I find change very, very infuriating. I like routine.
Getting worse as I get older.
Okay, this is something probably not good for me to know. It's going to get worse. There you go, Mum. Great. But it is. It's really difficult, and I think that partly goes a long way to explain why we're comfortable in old habits.
So Hillary was just saying about change, yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, I think of.
Yeah, no, that's good. Change is definitely something we're going to discuss. And Norma, any habits?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Perfect.
Please,
No, such
I'm
thing as
vouch for that. Yeah.
I just never give up. That's all.
Oh, there you go, see?
That's true.
I'm Alice, and I'm interested in the relationship between identity and habit.
Yeah, I'm glad. This is one of the bits of the talk that I included at the end because it's in the recent research and it's up and coming, and I personally found it to be super relevant, so I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. So Michael, you've just arrived. Shall I give you just a minute? You're my last person.
So I'd like to ask.
Well, I know who you are, so that's all good. Is there anything that brought you here tonight particularly that you want me to cover, or just generally interested? Any habits you're struggling with?
No, just generally.
Just generally,
Yeah.
okay, perfect. So
That's
everything
good.
will be useful.
Alright, so that's great, guys. So in that case, we'll get straight into it because I think we're going to cover a lot of different things that will hopefully touch on your areas of interest. If not, please feel free to put up your hand. If it's going too fast and you don't understand something, just wave a hand and stop me. And so we'll begin with the first point. So values is something that I use a lot in my work because I think it has a lot to do with this area of motivation. So often I find with my clients that the habits that we try to form are often ones that we think we should form. And sometimes it's useful to step back and look at your values and see how this new habit really fits in with your life. So when I say values, do you guys know what I mean by values? Yeah, so lots of heads nodding. So really just the types of ways that you'd like to live your life, the type of person you want to be. You've got a values list on the back of your handout, but the important thing to know about values is that they are really unique and personal, and there is no right or wrong. It's kind of like your preference for ice cream, right? I might like vanilla, Nick might like chocolate. Exactly. Is either of us right or wrong in our preference? No, right? They're just different choices, but they resonate with you. So it's really important to think about what your values are, how they resonate with you, because you can use this to fuel a habit that you'd like to start or to give up a bad habit. So let me give you an example. When I had to change my own kind of exercise and lifestyle, I thought, oh, look, I probably should do this. You know, I feel like I should. And when the alarm goes off at 6 a.m, I'm thinking, I have to do this. The doctor said I have to do this. It's good for me. Why doesn't it feel good for me? Why does it feel so miserable, right? So I'm not getting a lot of motivation. At first, obviously, as Ross said, you know, there's a bit of fear motivation when diabetes is being talked about. But how do I sustain it? It's hard for me to sustain that over time if I'm doing it because I've been told to. If we look at values, I know from the type of work I've done what my values are. I've thought about it and I know that they're about kindness, compassion, kind of being a caring person, being in a caring profession. That stuff's important to me. So I think, okay, how can I fit my habit in line with my values? You know, is it possible that I can think about this exercise in a different way? Can I think, okay, this is something I'm doing to care for my body. This is a show of kindness to myself. It's something that's going to keep me healthy. It's going to keep me well. It's time I can take out for myself in the morning. It's something that's actually kind to the people I love because it's going to keep me healthy and around in the long term. It's something that I'm doing that's actually really important. So suddenly I'm starting to feel kind of different about my habit. I'm thinking, actually, this is something that I want to do for me because it's important to me. It aligns with the type of way I want to live my life, which is to look after myself, to show the kindness that I show to other people, to my own self, to my own body. So thinking about our values in that way can really help fuel our motivation for what we want to do. So I'd encourage you to think about a change that you want to make. Think about how that fits in with your values, you know. And our values are things that we may not always be kind of living by all the time, but they're the things that matter to us. So that can usually help you go, oh, okay, maybe I can think about this as a thing that I do that's in line with flexibility, independence, humour, justice. Whatever your values are, can you make your habits in line with that? Because the research shows that the habits that we make that are in line with our values, with our sense of self, are actually sustained longer because we have that additional motivation and we feel them as a part of ourselves. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's the main thing about values. But I also want to say a few little extra bits about motivation, because there's a lot of research about how do you get yourself going. And one of my favourite things about motivation is that a lot of the researchers in this field, they tell a lot of stories about how they try things out on themselves as well. So they give you a lot of personal tips and you know they've done it. And the big tip that they bring most of the time is this idea of just start. So make it so small that you couldn't say no. So they've actually done these kind of wonderful research studies where they have one group of people and they say, okay guys, we want you to start flossing your teeth. It's really important for dental hygiene. After you brush, please floss. So that group just gets told that. They're the control group. Doesn't go so well. You know, they might start out at first doing well and then it peters off. The other group gets told, we want you to start a flossing habit. Can you please brush can you brush and then floss one tooth a night? Just one. That's all we want you to do. You can do more if you want, but you don't have to. So who do you think ends up flossing more? In fact, the second group. The second group. So from this research comes the belief that you've got to make it so small that it doesn't feel like a big change. For those of us who hate change, for those of us who struggle with motivation, you commit to 1 minute on the treadmill. You commit to doing one push-up, flossing one tooth, because you know what happens. You think, oh, well, geez, now I've got the floss out. Seems a bit of a waste. Maybe I'll just do the rest. You know, how long is it going to take? It really gets you over that hurdle of starting. So in the same vein, you choose just one habit. A lot of us, we have that kind of New Year's resolution effect where we think, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to do it all. But you start with one habit in one area. You start really small. And the research shows that that's the best way to overcome that little motivation hurdle. You just start with what you've got. You start with 1 minute of meditation on the mat. And often you do more, but you never have to. So that's your get out of jail free card. No one can say, I don't think I have time for 1 minute, right? I use that a lot with my clients. And we all like it because I say, okay, we really haven't done any mindfulness this session. How about we just both do 1 minute together? And then we say, wow, that was actually really good. Should we just do 5 more minutes? And it grows from there. So that's values and motivation. Any questions before I move on to talking about awareness and how we actually start doing our habits?
Well, I always struggle with certain clients to get them to do what stretches.
I can only imagine.
So stretches. So if I talk to my clients in a way that, look, just do one stretch a night or one a week, and start them off that way, and then they'll get inclined to do it every week.
They start developing a routine.
So maybe that's a way of putting it to them.
That's what I tend to try, and then from there you can build. Okay, how are you going with that? And I'm actually going to talk more about a technique that your clients might like when I talk about not giving up as well. Because often you miss a few days with something like stretching and you're like, oh. Yeah. And I'd also get them to think about values. Why are they coming to see you? You know, they're investing their time and money. When they go home, are they still bringing that care to their body? Because often you tend to think of it as homework from your therapist, right? But it can be, you can conceive of it differently, and that can help too.
That's a good tip.
Yeah. And remind me when we get to never give up, there's a little handout that they might like. So I'll give that to you.
Maybe not related, but I know that I think IBM, in the early days, they had Salesforce.
Yeah.
And they set these targets, so they had to get these targets. And then people weren't motivated by that, and they weren't reaching targets, feeling a bit dejected. And they were like, okay, let's set the target really low. So in a month, they were, I met my target after a week.
So you
really felt good. So it can apply.
I think that is
goals,
yeah.
Work goals and things like that too, what you want to achieve.
And a sense of achievement is really important actually. So maybe you feel like, oh, you know, I only had to do 1 minute and I did it every day. So I actually stuck to my habit. It's easier to get that sense of achievement. Yeah, I like that. Small goals, set them low, and positive reinforcement never hurts. Give it to yourself, give it to your family and friends. On motivation, that is one thing that's worth saying. I supervise an online platform for healthy living for a service called I Quit Sugar, and they have this really intense community that supports each other. And there is a lot of research out there that says if you can find a buddy, if you can find a friend, those habits last longer too. Employees who make a plan to work out together, that kind of stuff, that all helps as well. So Norma, if you're going for some lunchtime walk down the shops, be my buddy. Definitely, I believe that. I know that's helped me in the past, although I don't do it now. So I should add that in there. Yeah. So that's motivation. But then how about we want to talk about, let's make the change and make it easier for ourselves. Let's set ourselves up to win. And that's what awareness is all about. Because the problem with habits and why they're so hard to change bad habits or start new habits is what you've already said. We're creatures of routine, and a lot of what we do, we actually do on automatic pilot. So the research suggests that up to 40% of what you do every day is on autopilot, which I think is a staggering amount, actually. You think it's low? I was horrified, and then I thought, hang on, you get up, you shower, you get dressed, you make your breakfast. Yeah, I don't really pay attention to any of that, and the day's nearly gone. And that brings me to one of my favourite quotes. I love quotes, but I've tried to contain myself to a couple. But I just think this one is so relevant. It's a Dryden quote, and if you can't read it, it says, "We first make our habits, and then our habits make us."
Yes.
So powerful, huh? So, so true. So how do we unmake them if we don't like them? Okay, we've got to become conscious. You've got to make that unconscious process really clear to yourself. There's lots of ways you can do this. You can practice what's called mindfulness. Has anyone heard of mindfulness? Yeah, exactly. Lots of heads nodding. It's the process of being in the moment, non-judgmentally, which is really important, really hard. Being open, being conscious of what you're doing. Another way that you can do this, and that I do with my clients a lot, is we monitor at first. For the first week or so, we note down how many times did you smoke. And then I'm asking them to say, where was I? Who was I with? How was I feeling? So again, we're starting to try and become aware of what's causing people to smoke. So as you're monitoring or as you're being mindful, you're noticing your bad habit doesn't come out of the blue. It's tied up, and it's tied up to triggers or what we would call a cue, right? So the really clear example is with smokers. I'll say to them, what makes you smoke during the day? Tell me. And they'll say, I have my first cup of coffee and I have a cigarette. It's what I do. They go together. I have a glass of wine, I have a smoke. So they're cued by their environment, they're cued by their friends, they're cued by certain foods. And we all are with our bad habits. So what we need to do is kind of work out what they are. I know that when I was trying to change my diet, I used to sit down after dinner and I'd always have a bowl of ice cream because I love the sweets, right? And I would watch TV and I would eat something sweet. And the two became paired to the extent that sometimes I would watch my TV show without dessert and it would feel unsatisfying. Their heads nodding in the background, right? Okay, I'm not alone in this. That's what it's fulfilling. But what we know is that if you try to remove that behaviour, it pulls a lot of your energy. It pulls on your willpower really strongly, and that can be hard to resist if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling stressed. So what they do instead is they encourage you to do what's called the if-then technique, which is basically about replacing a habit instead of getting rid of it. What you need to do is you need to set up the decision to be better for you. So I say to myself, okay, dinner time's a problem. I always have dessert. What am I going to do? If I finish dinner, then I have a cup of tea. And what I do is I consistently start having this cup of tea. You choose something that you like, you choose something that's equally rewarding if it can be, or that meets the need. So I want to relax, I want to feel cozy. I have my cup of tea and it's not a decision, it's just an if-then. I've set up a rule in my head that says, if I go to a party and there's a cake going round, then I can say, oh, sorry guys, I'm watching my blood sugars. I've made up my mind before I go. So here you're trying to bring the autopilot into a good behaviour, yeah? And with a bad habit, you might try and replace it with something constructive. So, if I normally have a cup of coffee and smoke, okay, if I have a cup of coffee, I'm going to do the crossword because I've got something in my hand, I'm occupying my brain. You're replacing, you're not just sitting there going, I'd really like a smoke, I'd really like a cigarette right now. You're not struggling. The if-then has really good research behind it in terms of people keeping their habits for longer, feeling better about themselves, because that's really important actually to keep us motivated, and also being more consistent. So they still deviate, all of us do, but they deviate less and they come back faster because they've got a rule. They've made it a rule. They've made it a change that becomes a routine really easily. So the other thing that we can do is we can take some control of our environment. And that can also give you a way to get back in charge of your habits. So for example, you can set yourself up to make an easy win, or you can set yourself up to avoid a bad habit. The researcher that I really like who does this stuff on himself is a guy from Harvard, And he tells this story of how he was trying to watch less TV of an evening. So he took the batteries out of his remote. And he said every time he'd sit down on the couch, he'd go for the remote. He'd be like, oh, why do I do these experiments on myself? And I just love how he does this. And all he'd done was he put them in his bedside table. So 20 seconds away, he timed it. But it was enough to make that habit conscious again, right? You just turn on the TV, you're not thinking. But instead, suddenly he's gone, oh, I can't do that. It's so close that he found, and what he found in the research he replicated was that you're then making an active decision and you go, oh yeah, that's right, that's why I'm doing this. So 20 seconds, you've got to make a bad habit 20 seconds harder. If you're trying to cut down on your sweets, put them 20 seconds further away. If you're trying to stop watching TV, you just make it 20 seconds harder. And the same with a good habit. All this stuff that they often say in the Telegraph, like, keep your gym gear by your bed. That is actually true. But the reason it works is because it's making a good habit an autopilot or a bad habit more difficult. So you're wanting to make a good habit easier. You take the hassle out of it. Because by the time, your shoes are right there, you think, oh, I may as well just go. So autopilot can be used to our advantage, taking control of our environment. Might be looking confused.
No, I like the idea.
You like it? Yeah.
Good. I've got to say, if I'm watching a football match, I'm always eating a big packet of chips. And I just couldn't look. And every time I eat a big packet of chips, I would, obviously it doesn't make it feel the best. So I thought, what am I going to do? So what I used to do is watch the clock of the game, and every 2 minutes I would have a chip, and that cut me down. And I wouldn't need a whole bag of chips. So I made that decision consciously, and it worked.
And you made a rule about it.
Yeah.
If there's been 2 minutes,
Yeah,
then
I can have a chip.
Exactly.
And it worked.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
What I actually love about this stuff is it shows you, you're not a kind of a victim of bad habits. Like, you are in charge. It's not always easy, but it can actually be fun. You can be flexible. You can kind of be creative with like, okay, how am I going to set this up? Take the batteries out of your remote. And what I forgot to say is he also put his phone next to him and a book because he wanted to try and be more social, call friends, and read more. So because it was right there and the remote control wasn't, it's that simple sometimes. Which brings me to my next point, which is that sometimes it's harder, right? So sometimes my clients say to me, no, I don't know what the triggers are. I was going really well for a month and then I slid backwards. And I can't pinpoint it, I'm stressed, I'm this, I'm that, but I don't quite know how this happened. So what I'm going to give you guys now is probably a more clinical tool, but I just love it. It's a little bit more in depth, so you'd probably do it if it's a habit you really care about, that you've got to be committed to. And it is something that you can easily find on the internet, a blank one, but you could just draw it up yourself. I'm going to draw one for you now. And it's called the Behaviour Chain Analysis. So something I forgot to mention is, tonight when I'm using stories, if I'm talking about a theme from my work, it's confidential, it's protected, it's not referring to any particular client, but there are themes that come up again and again in the work that I do. So with the Behaviour Chain Analysis, I'm going to tell you about how it might be experienced by someone who has an eating disorder, because this is often the kind of literature that it's used in, because they say to you, okay, I've had a binge. It's been a really bad binge, but I don't know how it happened. I was going really well. And that's often the way, in eating disorders, they cycle back around. So we have to try and work out the triggers, and they say, I don't know. I can't monitor it because I'm actually too ashamed at the time. I don't write it down. So we start here. We start with the behaviour that they're trying to get rid of. And we say, okay, that's fine. We'll work it out together. Tell me about this binge. Where were you? And they say, okay, I was actually in the car park of the supermarket. I didn't even go home. I was just eating the ice cream from the tub. And you say, okay, so tell me how did you get there? Was it a supermarket near you? Did you walk? Did you drive? Oh, I drove because I don't like going to the local supermarket because I'm ashamed. I don't want people to see me. I drove for 10 minutes. So this is your first link in what we would call the behaviour chain. You drove to the supermarket. Okay, good to know. So you drove for about 10 minutes, and during that time, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? And they might say, I don't know, I was trying to block it out. They might say, I was thinking, don't do this, don't do this. But they're going to be able to start telling you because you're piecing it together so small. What were you feeling? What were your emotions? I was actually feeling bad about work because I had a bad day. Okay, so tell me about work. So you came from work? Yeah, I came from work. And how was the day? And I'm asking them about the whole day because what we're trying to understand is where the vulnerability came in. There are lots of things that make you vulnerable to going off track. And there are also lots of options that you have. So they might tell me, well, I knew I was stressed and I knew that you'd say, go out and go for a walk. So I went for a walk. So we're noticing all the good things as well as all the triggers. We're saying, okay, here you did something really good. That was really constructive. But then what happened? Oh, I had a bad review from my boss and I woke up this morning and I was tired. So we're starting to see lots of vulnerabilities coming in. And from there we start to understand the bigger picture, right? So it's a really, really helpful tool because it shows you these things don't just happen. Like sometimes you've been coming for a fall and maybe that's okay. Maybe we all have bad days. And what's important is that you start to understand it so that next time you can do something different. Like it's not the end of the world that this happened. But what usually happens is we break our routine, we break our habit, and we go right back to old patterns, right? Because we're like, this is useless, I'll never change, I'm just not a person who meditates, or I can't keep the house clean, or whatever it is for us. But actually, if you just sit down, it takes all of 5 minutes, you track it back and you go, okay, there are a lot of factors leading to this. Some of them I can probably change, some of them I can't, but now I know a little bit more what makes me vulnerable. And on the subject of vulnerability, this is a favourite acronym of mine, HALT. It stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And these are very well-known things in the world of psychology that make us all vulnerable. Can anyone here relate? Right? Yeah, so it's super easy and it's a great acronym. You say to yourself, okay, HALT. Few giggles, huh? I'm not alone.
Norma knows this one well. Hungry,
angry. Hungry, angry, Norma. Angry. I've never seen that side of Norma. Never. Give it time, huh? For me, I know that it's tired. For me, tired always deviates my diet. But whatever it is for you, it's really nice if you're starting to, like if you become mindful and you notice, okay, I'm feeling this is going to be a day where I really slide off track. Okay, HALT. Just take a minute. Can you address any of those? Like before you go and eat something like junk food, can you have a little snack? If you're lonely, can you just call a friend for 5 minutes, tee up a lunch date, get some support? Can you have a 5-minute nap in your car? Like do those things first. And then if you still, deviate from your habit, okay, that happens. But try those things first. Try to be aware of checking in with yourself. How are you going? Where are you at in the behaviour chain? Are you headed for a fall? Or are you actually, you're tracking quite well, you can make a change before it happens. So that's a really big part of awareness because what I think it says is, there's flexibility here. You can do something different. Does that make sense? Excellent. Any questions on that bit, guys?
What would that HALT?
Yeah.
I get tired, I get hungry.
Yes! And then it just whirlpools, right? Oh.
Yeah. So what are you suggesting in that instance that, when you're tired, you sort of do things because you want to do stuff and get stuff done. Then you get hungry because you want to get yourself more energy, but it doesn't really give you more energy anyway. Yeah. So what do you do in that cycle to try to, be more productive? And
to cut it off.
Yeah, apart from going to sleep, but you can't.
But you can't. Yeah, and I think that's a really big ask, especially for people, who are parents or have a couple of jobs, run your own business, these kind of things, because people say to me, but I don't have time. And what I would probably say in that case is, okay, my preference is that you address the one that's at the start of the cycle. So you're really, really tired, right? I know that you can't have a nap. But John, can you close the door for 5 minutes and do 5 minutes of meditation? Can you get one off YouTube? Can you do a 2-minute one? And just give yourself that little bit of pause. It's not as good as sleeping, but the research out there says that an hour of meditation is like 4 hours of sleeping, stuff like this. Avanti tells me this, one of our other practitioners. But then, so you've done something to address the tired. You might still be hungry, but my preference would be, address them in order. So then you might need to have a little snack. And if you're really feeling like, okay, emotions are haywire, angry is something that's harder to address on the spot, I think. So what you might do is say, okay, I'm noticing that my emotions are overwrought. I'm going to set aside some time later, maybe not today, but even if you acknowledge that emotion, it makes a big difference. You say, later tonight I'm going to do something. What are you angry about? Sit down and address it if you can. Or if you can't, make some time to get some support. So make sure that you know that a respite is coming. And that can often help you. If we know a finish line's close, gives you that little bit of self-preservation to get through that day. But yeah, does that help? Yeah, definitely.
That's just a technique that I've used with I work in support with children in education. And one of the techniques I've used with children that are angry, as well as some of the mindfulness or things, is also getting them to say, okay, if I was looking at this from outside, if I was hovering on the roof and I was looking at what's happening, what would I see? What am I doing?
Yeah.
So if you can do that in that moment, it actually takes you outside it a little bit and helps you control that anger.
Yeah, so that you're not your anger, you're looking at it. Exactly. No, I think that's brilliant.
Doing that flooding, that emotional flooding.
Yeah, when you're feeling really overwhelmed. So you say take yourself, if you were looking down above, I really like that. Yeah.
Which is mindfulness, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like taking a different stance and looking at it.
With anger, like tonight, to be honest with you, so I was trying to get something out of the garage. It was a real mess, and it was just something fell down, and it just made me. I just lost it, and I just chucked the whole thing across the garage, and then I threw something else. I'm like, well, where'd that come? And I'm trying to. I don't know. I mean, at that moment, there's not much you can do about it. I think it's really hard to. I mean, I don't have any strategy for it. I mean, I can do it. At that point, it was actually quite a nice relief. I wasn't going to hurt anything, but I really thought about it's going to take me half an hour to pick everything up.
To clean everything up.
So, I don't know.
That's your motivation for not doing it.
Well, you know, I'm just doing it at the moment when anger occurs. It's something that sometimes it's a case of real release. I felt good doing that, but I mean, what do you do about it? You know, when you're confronted by anger? Like, I can get tired, I know what to do. Hungry, I know what to do. Lonely, that's okay. Angry, to me, it's tricky.
Is that counting to 10 in your head, does that calm you down from anger?
Well, there are lots of things that, anything that gets you into a mindful headspace, and there are lots of different ways that people do this. But my first question would have been, did it feel good? Because sometimes you can have a release, right? But if it's not a practical release, then we're probably looking at other strategies. And what I'd be doing with my clients is saying, what did you need in that moment? And how could you get it a different way? So the mindfulness comes in, because mindfulness gives you that split-second separation from your emotions, so that you can say, I'm noticing that I'm feeling blah. I'm noticing that I'm feeling angry. I'm noticing that I'm feeling so anxious right now. And if you can pause and take that headspace, like I really love this idea of, can you just imagine yourself looking down? What are you seeing in that moment? It gives you the separation to make a decision. Because anger is a reaction, right? It's an immediate response. It's not like a considered moment of, okay, I'm feeling angry. I can see I need to deal with this. I'm going to set aside some time to release my stress, because maybe I'm just overstressed. Maybe you're rushing, who knows, kind of what was going on. And we would probably do a behaviour chain and be like, okay, what's led up to it? Where did that come from for you? Because in those moments, I often find, more so for my clients with drugs and alcohol, it's usually too late. By the time they're here, they're wanting to throw a bucket, just like you. But back here, they have a lot more control. So it's about noticing awareness before your level is that high. That's a lot of what we do in mindfulness, is like, where's it at in your body? Where do you carry anger? How do you know when you're at a 10, oh, I feel like this? How do you know when you're at a 5? Oh, okay, that's a bit harder, but maybe I know that there's a bit of a clench in my jaw. There's a little bit of muscular tension. Yeah, so awareness of your body sensations. Because, managing emotions is a habit as well, right? So yeah, lots more I could say on that, but I think for now that probably...
halt.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you say to yourself, maybe are there some other things you can address? You're tired. Yeah. So definitely give that a go. But what I was going to say at the end is, as you can see, this is one of my favourite topics, and I will contain myself to only 15 minutes more, but I will put my email up at the end. So if you're trying a new habit, or you've tried one of these techniques and you got stuck, do let me know, because I will be happy to talk about it. You'll have that option as well. Because some of it is like you got to try it, right? You take it home, you give it a go, you get stuck, and you're like, oh, I wish I'd known to ask this question, but I didn't know until I tried it. So definitely stay in touch. So that's the first two. The last two are pretty short, in fact. So what we know so far is about how to set yourself up, how to get motivated, how to kind of make habitual change easier for yourself. Now we want to know, how do you sustain it? Because this is where a lot of the research is focused, because we go wrong, right? Like human behaviour struggles unless you've got into a routine. If you're in a routine, you're usually sweet and you're rolling along. But a lot of us, we haven't got there yet, and what we know is that people give up a little too soon. It's kind of a confronting figure, but I think most of you have probably heard it takes 8 weeks to make a new habit. This is actually from the skills research, yeah. I know, you're looking as downtrodden as I am.
Everyone's like, yeah,
Yes.
20 days.
There's actually some great articles out there about where the 21 days came from that I read and said, you know, this was, I don't know, from some research about people adapting to surgeries, and it took about 21 days to adapt to, you know, a new limb or something physically. But emotionally, they found it was a lot slower. And now they're actually even saying, I think it's 66 days, which is actually closer to 9 weeks. And I'm thinking, okay, so how do we hold ourselves through these 9 weeks, right? It is not embedded yet. That's the issue that we're having. So we go, oh, no, I can't keep this up because you've missed 4 days in a row and you think, well, that's not a habit. But in fact, 4 days out of 8 weeks, it's actually a really small percentage. So what we have to do first is keep ourselves going. So I think knowing this is actually, 8 weeks is maybe confronting, but on the other hand, it says to you, okay, you know, you've got a bit of flexibility within this. It's not actually about doing it every single day. In fact, the people who are most self-critical and kind of rigid to their habits tend to do the worst, because as soon as they deviate, they think that's the end. And I relate to this because I'm a perfectionist, so I always think, no, this is the end. Can't do it. Too hard, it's not working. And it has taken me a long time to try and do kind of a more compassionate approach. Self-compassion is something I use a lot in my work. There's some really good resources out there. It's not so relevant to tonight, but if you are someone with high standards, if you struggle with perfectionism, the self-compassion research is really helpful in saying to yourself, hey, it's okay, maybe you had a bad day. A big part of the behaviour chain that I always do with my clients, because a lot of them have perfectionistic tendencies, and it's a mandatory part of the exercise, is called the repair. So you reflect on how you got there, and then you say, okay, you're here, you binged. How are you feeling? I feel awful, I hate myself, I'm just awful, I'm a terrible person, and I feel fat. And you say, okay, well, how can you repair? What would you do? And they're like, no, I want to go home and I need to get back on a diet and I need to punish myself because it's been a really bad thing. And you have to gently find a way to say, okay, there's been a deviation from what you wanted. How can you repair this to yourself? If we'd started here when you were tired, when you were stressed, could you have done something nice for yourself then? Oh yeah, maybe. Can you do it now? Like, instead of feeling like, great, this has been the worst day, can you actually get it back on track by going, okay, you know, maybe I'll make a plan to go to the gym the next day, or whatever it is that your habit is about. Can you just get yourself back on track? Because we often, can you guys relate to the idea of thinking, oh, this day's lost. I had that piece of cake, so now I'll have pizza for dinner, so now I'll have dessert, because the day's a write-off, right? Yeah. The sooner you can come back around, the day doesn't even have to be a write-off. It can be an hour. It can be 10 minutes. You can actually get your day back on track faster. Brings me to my other favourite quote, which I think is a really beautiful quote. And for those of you at the back, it says, courage does not always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I'll try again tomorrow. And I just think that's a lovely idea. Was that you too? It's not the quote, right? Yeah. So the idea being, pick yourself back up, like dust yourself off, see what you can do to start again. Because one of the big things is that it is 8 weeks, you know, it's not a sprint, it's a journey, you know, so you take your time and you go for progress, not perfection. And Stu, this is the resource that I was thinking really illustrates it well. So this is not one of mine, this is something that's available online and it's by an artist. And what it is here is every circle represents one day of the year. So she's got all the days here. And down the side it says, big things happen one day at a time. Commit to working on it every day for a year. If you miss a day, let it go. Shoot for progress, not perfection. And I think what you can see is when you're in the thick of it and you miss 6 days at the start, that feels like a lot. It feels like the habit's completely gone. But if we look at how long it went, now those 6 days, they don't seem like such a big part of it, right? Overall, this person keeps their habit. So it's a really great tool that you just stick on the fridge and you tick it off and, you know, and you can say, okay, I missed a few days, but it starts to give you that sense of reward that we were talking about too, you know. you're feeling like, hey, I'm getting somewhere here. And even if the whole first start of the year is white, you can pick it up and start colouring it in and make something out of it. So a really good resource for those of you who are visual, because a visual motivation is useful.
Yes, so it turns it into an emotional thing, into a kind of like if you're actually noting it and marking it down, so you're actually turning it into what's that called, where so you're changing it and making it look like visual and notable and...
Exactly right. It's kind of, I feel like it's the adult version of putting stickers on it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly how it feels. Yeah, and you can feel pretty proud of your progress. And those small days where you missed a day, they seem less important in the big picture. So we're always really trying to help ourselves see the big picture. With my clients, I'm trying to help them see the long goal. Where are we going? We're aiming for healthiness in the end. Little detours here and there, that's a part of the human progress. Unfortunately, it's not like this. It's always like that, isn't it? And we all know that. Yeah, so not giving up.
One more thing too is like the 8 weeks. Like, because I teach swimming as well, and with like babies, 6 month to 1 year old babies, I get the parents to teach them how to go under the water. And that takes 8 weeks to get the child to be, like with a cue, you give them a cue and then they learn it in 8 weeks and they do it.
That's amazing, huh?
And that's, I thought that was amazing when you mentioned that.
That 8 weeks,
8 weeks is true.
And it's no secret that like a lot of courses that really work, like mindfulness courses and stuff, they're all 8 weeks long because they're trying to help you get that habit before they leave you alone. So that's what's, it's human behaviour takes that long to catch up. I think it's fascinating. Like the research says there is some variability, obviously, but the curve was almost like this many people took more or less 8 weeks. And I'm thinking, okay, this is really, there's no surprises that the Medicare system gives you 10 sessions. I was like, that's roughly about 8 weeks plus 2 refreshers. So I try to keep that in mind when I'm working with my clients. Like we can actually make big change in 8 weeks. It's not so long. Yeah. So final point, guys, in our final bit of time, the research on identity is really new. A lot of it is still more anecdotal, it's still more clinical, but I really liked it and I wanted to share it because a lot of my clients, it really resonates with them as well. And I don't know if anyone remembers, a woman called Gretchen Rubin had this book that was quite successful called The Happiness Project, a couple of years ago now. And she wrote about ways to make your life better and changes that she tried. And one of the things she talked a lot about was habits. And she brought forward a lot of this research, and I never saw a thing of it until I was doing this online wellbeing program, and one of the participants shared it with another participant, and I followed it up because I thought, this is brilliant. And what they kind of say is, if you're having trouble keeping a habit that you're trying to start, that you want to start, it's possible that you're having an identity clash. The habit is clashing with your sense of who you think you are. So not so much values, but more the way I see myself. So let me give you an example, another kind of client-based example. I see a lot of people who are kind of in their older years to a stage only, they're not necessarily drinking too much by general means, but the doctors said to them, you need to cut down your drinking and your fine dining because of cholesterol, because of your heart, so on and so on and so on. And so a lot of my clients say to me, male and female, they've been that person who's the life of the party. They're like, no, but I'm that person, I have fun, I drink, I stay out late, I entertain people, I tell the stories. That's who I am. I'm the social person. And my drinking, my eating, it's all a part of that. It's part of my identity as that fun person. And I don't want to be that person who has one light beer. I don't want to be that person who doesn't drink. That guy is boring. That guy is a killjoy. No, that is not who I am. And they're fighting it so hard. And they're like, but I know I have to do this. But I can't do this. How can I do this? I don't want to change who I am. So the question becomes, how do we change our sense of identity? Or how do we help ourselves see that maybe the habit can be a new part of who you think you are? Like maybe you need to do some work around expanding that. So in session, we'd be looking at the thoughts and the feelings and the behaviours that go with who you are. And I'd be saying, okay, so you are a really social person, you entertain people, you bring the party. Was alcohol always a part of that? Or is that actually something that's just you've picked up along the way? Like the bad habit it is. Can you think of breakfasts where you've entertained everyone and no one's been drinking? Can you think of kids' parties where you've had everyone in stitches? Maybe you're the life of the party anyway. Maybe you wouldn't be that boring person. Maybe that guy was always boring. even if he drank, maybe that's not anything to do with identity. Well, maybe it is. Maybe your identity needs to open up a little. So let me tell you a story from my own life about that, where I did have to make some identity changes. So when I got diagnosed, they said to me, you have to eat this low glycemic index diet. Ross has probably heard of this, but has anyone else heard of this?
Yes.
Yes. So they say no white bread, no white rice, no white potatoes, no refined sugar. So suddenly I was a girl, 22, I was single, I was dating, and I loved to eat out. I would try everything, I enjoyed dessert, it was my favourite course. And suddenly they're saying, oh, I can't have pizza, I can't have pasta, I can't have anything with white rice. And I'm thinking, no, I am not that girl who says, can I get the fish? But instead of the chips, can I get the salad on the side? And if there's a sauce, can you take it off? And can you tell me what's in that sauce as well? And I'm thinking, no, I am not this high maintenance person. I can't do it. It's not who I am. And I really struggled. And I never really knew until this habit research came out that I was like, okay, that was a massive identity clash. And it took me a really long time. I used to go on dates and eat really badly because I didn't want to be that person. And suddenly I realised, okay, this is a problem. And you have to decide, is the habit more important, or is this idea of myself that I hold on to more important? And I thought, okay, this is going badly. The doctors are saying to me, you're not doing well. You've got to do better. And so I started to try and reconceptualise, like maybe I can still enjoy food and be a passionate foodie, but I'm more like a health foodie, or I care about what I eat. Maybe that's how it is. It does come back to your values too. Maybe I can say, part of my identity is that I look after my food and I still love it. I started cooking a lot more. I started finding things that I enjoyed and I started sharing it with friends. And now I would say it's one of the biggest parts of my identity is that I do say to people, no, I eat this way because I love it, because this food is awesome. Let me show you how good healthy food can be. Let me show you, what it's done for me, that I feel great. So you can open bits of your identity up as well if there's an identity clash. But I think really I raise it because it's a topic that doesn't get talked about enough in habits. But, by our ages, we have a pretty strong sense of who we are as a person. We have ideas that we carry. I've always been this way. This is how I do things. This is the type of person I am. We're holding on to a lot of those things pretty tightly, and we don't even realise it until we get this habit that, it doesn't match. So keeping in mind the identity stuff, just a really useful thing. I don't necessarily have any tried and true strategies for it. I think it's something you probably talk through with someone. You try and decide what's important. But if a habit is sticking, that's when I would be considering it. If a change is really hard for a client, I'm going to start asking them, how does this fit with your sense of self?
Well, one thing that happens to me with identity is like I got really sick in the stomach and I couldn't have full cream milk. And when I went out with friends, I would try and have full cream milk, but full milk, normal milk, and that would upset my stomach the next day. So I just really got upset with that identity thing. That said to myself, no, I'm going to drink what I can drink. And if, like, so when I used to have drink the soy milk, all my mates used to go, "What are you drinking soy milk for? Why are you weak? What's wrong with you?" And I was just like, I don't care. I need to drink soy milk. Otherwise, I have a bad day, and I don't want to do that. So I just said, "No, I'm going to have soy milk," and my friends just got used to it.
They do get used to it.
They get used to it.
People get used to it. And they don't judge you. Often the judgment's in your own head.
So,
like for me, it certainly was. People go, "Wow, that's so great. Good for you. I want to eat healthier too." And I think, "Oh, really? Is that?"
Yeah.
You're shocked.
You change other people by changing yourself.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah. So really interesting.
I had a friend, it's a funny little funny.
Yeah.
So I went to down like that, one of the Italian restaurants and said, "Have you got wholemeal pasta? Wholemeal pasta?" Because they wanted to have. Anyway, of course, it's a whole meal. It's a whole meal.
Oh my goodness. The place where we go sometimes for our coffee, it says like, no soy, no skim, no sugar, no excuses or something. And I'm like, okay, these are not the people where I can be like, do you have almond milk? There's no almond milk. Now I'm mindful of the time. Are you eyeballing me for the time, Norma? Or are you just smiling politely? So this is basically the end of where I'm at. But it has been a lot of information that I've given you, and I'm mindful of that. So I do have a little trick to remembering the 4 things that I've talked about tonight. So you've got your values, awareness, never give up, and identity. But if you jiggle them around and you think values, awareness, identity, never give up, you get vain. Yeah? So in the line of identity, remember to be vain. Look after your habits. It is not a shameful thing to stand up and be vain in this case, right? It's just a little mnemonic. I do love a good acronym to help you remember things. And on that note, basically, this does scratch the surface of the habit stuff. A lot of the stuff I've talked about, thoughts, feelings, behaviours, we do unpack that more in depth. You guys all know I work here, I do one-on-one sessions, but what we're also talking about, myself and I was talking to Susie about it, was running a more in-depth habits workshop, maybe a half day, a couple of hours, where you would bring something you're working on, bring a problem, we would unpack it through exercises, so not like a talk, like a workshop, that you would come away with a lot of strategies and you'd be working with myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my email on the board anyway, so that you can all let me know how you're going. And if you are interested in any follow-up, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. As you know, this is obviously one of my favourite topics, and it's been great to have you all share it as well. Thanks for sharing your own stories with me. Can you all read that? Is that clear enough? So liesbethgeerligs@gmail.com. I do have my Petrozzi address forwarding to that anyway, so either will work. My cards are here if you have that instead. And I think that was pretty much everything I wanted to cover. Did I answer all your questions? If not, tell me now.
Can I, there's 2 things. One of the things that when you're trying to give something up, I found, 30 years ago I used to smoke, and I found if you use a different language, it's easier. I'd go out and when I was that age, the social forum was go down to the pub, and if you're at the pub and somebody offers you a cigarette and you say, no, I'm trying to give up.
Yes.
They're the ones that try and belt them.
Yes, they do.
Instead, I said, no, I don't smoke.
I don't smoke.
And they just stop.
Yeah.
And it's the same with anything. I've got a friend that's just recently given up alcohol, and the worst people that they encountered was their friends.
Yeah.
I'll go on, one won't hurt you. Mm-hmm. Which is, you'd expect your friends to be a bit more supportive.
It's true. Yeah, it's happened to me a lot. I think it's also the social system doesn't like change either. They're like, well, now you're making us all uncomfortable.
Their idea of your identity. So
Absolutely.
they've got you pigeonholed as whatever that is, so they want you to say things.
Absolutely. I always share my desserts with you, my girlfriends say. I don't want to eat my own whole dessert. Well, what have you done? So changing your language is a really good point as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And the second thing is, I wanted to ask a question here. I have habits that I'd like to get rid of. Is it easier if you replace them with one that you prefer to have?
That you'd like to do. The research says yes, so I've taken it away, but your if-then rule is about replacing. Right. So my advice would be try and think of what the habit did and try and replace it with something similar. So if you've got an emotional need met, which is very common with eating, you know, comfort foods or reward foods, can you reward yourself a different way? Can you comfort yourself by doing something cozy, have a bath, buy a magazine, treat yourself? That kind of replacement is good, but even any replacement is better. Apparently even a neutral replacement, like now I'm just going to go for a walk or read a magazine or whatever it is, will work better than just trying to withhold. Yeah, so you want to actually create a new behaviour. So see how you go with that one.
Thanks.
Definitely. Thank you so much, guys. I don't want to leave you.